I think renewables are a viable source and that we should do what we can to help the system be sustainable. But I've never thought green energy should be or could be the total source because it is dependent on nature. What is happening, red chili heads and other chili heads? Whatever your chili preference is, be a chili. Welcome to New Mexico Red. We are going to have a little fun today with economics. Fun with economics. Oh, joy. We're going to hit kind of an overview of real quick of the different areas, 7 areas of key economics in the state, where we make our livings from. And we're going to look specifically at energy. So just let me give you a few things to look at. This is something we're going to take several weeks to do, as go over each of the different areas. But I wanted to give you a kind of a big picture, really 50, maybe 100,000 foot view. Is we obviously got a population of 2,095,000 people roughly. In December of 2020, our labor force consisted of 929,738 people. Of those, 853,237 were employed. Our unemployment rate had climbed to 8.2%, and the national average 6.7%. So we saw, I think we have at this point somewhere around 65,000 people unemployed in the state. We are also looking at kind of at about, I think it's a 19 point something poverty rate in the state, which is substantially higher than the national average as well, which we're going to get into that at some point too. It's just not going to be right now. So my whole goal here is to kind of get a sketch overview of each one of the areas that are really important in the state for our economic base, and look a little bit at some of the pros and the cons of that. And then by the time we're at the end of it, this is a journey for me. I am not going to be well versed in this stuff. I'm sure there are those of you who are in different aspects of these areas that know more about your area than I can. And so I'm kind of exploring it myself and getting a grasp of it myself. So I just want you to come along for the ride, and we'll see what happens. I think it's very curious to me, and something we're going to hit. Obviously, probably the last one we're going to really talk about will be the administrative and federal government area. But it's very interesting to me that the largest employers in the state are the federal and state governments, respectively. We don't tend to think about that. We don't tend to think about how many people are employed by government. What I really think is interesting is during this whole COVID thing, might be one of the reasons that they didn't really care about how those of us in the private sector were hurting, because there's so many people in the state that are still getting their paychecks. Regardless of what happened during this whole thing, a large percentage of people in the state continue to get their paychecks from the federal and state government coffers, which we're paying into, but then we're over here starving and dying, and not me particularly. I'm not starving. I'm just kidding. Fat joke. But we are hurting severely in all of our smaller communities and all the communities, but particularly down here in the south central, southeast part of the state. So many businesses are having to shutter their doors or reduce everything they've got going on just to try to stay afloat because of the COVID lockdowns. But all the state employees and the government employees are continuing to get their paychecks. And that's the tough part of it. So let's go real quickly into the 7 areas of economics that we're going to look at over the next several episodes. The number one we're going to look at today is energy. We're going to delve into that. Number 2 would be agriculture. These are not, these are more in terms of alphabetical than they are in terms of actual ranking. It's just a list of where they're at. So energy, agriculture, aerospace, distribution, logistics, and transportation. Interestingly enough, transportation is huge in this state because there's so much we're having to get out of the state in terms of energy production. And also that is the highest area of energy usage in the state. Transportation is. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing about that area. Who thinks about logistics and transportation very much whenever you're thinking about economy. Major factors for all states. Tourism, food, and retirement is a big one for us. Film and television has become a very large segment of our economy, particularly in the last couple of years under this new administration. And their goal is to increase that and grow it. And New Mexico is actually becoming more and more attractive to the Hollywood crowd. A lot of the reason is because California itself is under so much regulatory nonsense that they think they're going to get away from it by coming to New Mexico, which I find that kind of funny for obvious reasons. The last one is administrative and federal government. So hang on to your hats and let's go dive into energy real quick and see what we can come up with. Okay, let's take a look at energy. Let's get some, as we're looking at energy, let's have some energy. Everyone out there, have some energy. Okay, I freely give it to you. Like renewable energy is just free from out of the air. It's so good for you until it's icy and rainy and dark. When the sun's shining, it's great. Or the wind's blowing. All right. Let's talk about it. So historically, New Mexico has always been a ranching and a mining state. This stuff is on my mind because there's a lot of different reasons that this has been a hot topic lately. Last week's electric shutdown debacle in Texas, big time problem with a system that was built for not as severe weather as they got. There are wind farms in the northern part of Europe and in the higher up in the US where the weather's really nasty, but it's built for it. They're more expensive. It's built for it. But the Texas is not built for that. And so they had a massive shutdown and it caused all kinds of issues. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the wind portion of what we're talking about today, because I do think that's something to pay attention to. The other thing that we have to worry about here in New Mexico and has been a hot topic for us in the last few weeks. First thing our new president did was sign a 100-day freeze on all federal leasing of lands for oil and gas. Most of the leasing that happens in the state of New Mexico is on federal land, and that's where we get nearly at least 40, maybe 45% of our revenue for the state comes from those leases. There is some private property that has leases on it, but not enough to help us stay where we're at. We'll dig a little bit more into that shortly. So that affects those two kind of things affect our major revenue stream for the state and the majority of New Mexicans. A lot of job issues there. We're looking at job losses across the entire spectrum of our economy and the regions of our economy from the COVID situation and rippling effects going forward because a number of places are going to shut down. If we shut down something like the major resource for funding for areas of the state government, then what are we going to do? What are we going to do to replace that? Renewable energy doesn't replace that revenue. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. So let me dive on into some more details. I'll just give you a brief rundown of some things that are in the energy sector, the areas of the energy sector. Obviously, natural gas, a major one. The San Juan Basin is the largest reserve of natural gas in the United States. That's up around Farmington, Grants, up on the Navajo and Hickory Apache reservations, and on into Colorado. That basin is massive. New Mexico provides 5% of U.S. natural gas. We also produce and distribute far more to other states than we use. So we're a net exporter of natural gas in a big way. Natural gas is the chief means of heating in the state, and we have really low prices for natural gas because we do produce so much. We also it's as a primary heat supply. It's also a primary supply for electricity production, followed by coal-fired plants and renewable energy sources. So renewable energy sources obviously being targeted through the bill that was passed in 2019 that we'll discuss shortly, to be targeted to increase massively over the course of the next couple of decades, at a pace that's probably not healthy, but it is something that is growing, which means that they're going to reduce natural gas, which is a very clean burning, ecologically friendly fuel. They're going to start reducing that, and it's also inexpensive. The coal-fired stuff, they've already begun to reduce that, and they're going to reduce more. They're probably going to close another plant in 2022. So those are all areas that we're looking at when it comes to natural gas. In terms of coal, New Mexico has 3% of the nation's recoverable coal, puts us at the 10th largest reserve in the U.S. So we are third largest, I believe, in natural gas. Certainly in the top 10 in terms of natural gas. We are 10th largest reserve in the U.S. for coal. We only have a few coal-fired plants for electric production that are working. Several have been closed down in recent years, and some heavy job losses there. And there will be obviously more being shut down. They're looking. I think their plan in this bill is to remove all coal-fired plants going forward. But here we are sitting on one of the largest reserves in the U.S. for coal. But they've shut down the mines. They've shut down and the plants, which have resulted in heavy losses of skilled labor. And these guys work in the mines and working in those plants are not just regular labor that you get in McDonald's or whatever. They're people that have spent many, many years learning their craft and being very good at it. And then what? So let's move on. We're going to move on to oil next. Okay. Now let's step into looking at oil production, because this is the major part of what drives the state in many ways. 10% of U.S. oil is what we produce in New Mexico. That makes us the third largest oil producer in the United States. And the United States in the last 3 years, became the largest producer of oil in the world. 4 years ago, we were seventh. The technologies, safe and reliable technologies that have created this oil surplus in the southeastern part of New Mexico and also in the northwestern corner. More gas up there, but oil and gas, natural gas in southeastern New Mexico. We have increased that production so much that we jumped from seventh to fourth in 4 years, which is pretty remarkable. By the end of 2019, New Mexico was producing 30 million barrels a month of crude oil. And I think it's higher than that, or was higher than that prior to or during the middle of the COVID mess. Obviously, we've had a major setback with the silliness of nations having oil price battles in the middle of a COVID pandemic. Of course, that most likely was a planned move. It certainly set them up in a good way, but damaged us severely because they wanted to damage the lead producer of oil in the world for obvious reasons. I mean, it's just an economic move on their part. There's the danger of the federal freeze on the state is that 60% roughly of our production is on federal land. So the state of New Mexico gets 50% of the royalties that the federal government gets from leases on federal land. One of the reasons that the state has done so well and been able to do a number of things is because they've received hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars each year for the last several years from those leases. Deciding to go and move in a different direction and bring in renewable energy, which has its problems we'll talk about whenever I get there, in terms of no royalties coming back to the state to replace what they're going to potentially remove from federal leases. So I found this from an article that was very interesting. New Mexico, which accounts for 57% of federal onshore oil production and 31% of onshore natural gas production, is projected to be among the state's hardest hit, losing over 62,000 jobs by 2022. A ban on federal leasing could put at risk more than $1 billion of federal revenue sharing. That's in for the state of New Mexico. So when you look at that reality, you realize, just how heavy a situation that is. I know we lost, I think we had 18,000 jobs. We have currently about 18,000 jobs in the oil patch. We had 25,000 jobs, over 25,000 jobs last March. In 2020, we've lost 7,200 jobs in the oil patch across the state. That's all aspects of the oil and gas thing. I call it the oil patch because that's what everybody who works in the oil patch calls it. So I think those, when you start looking at real jobs and the peripheral jobs, it's not just the jobs. Those are jobs working on the oil rigs. All of the other jobs for support around that, are heavily affected. I have a family member who has a business that helps keep the machinery operating in southeastern New Mexico, and it cut his business in half. And along with the impact on him directly as a supplier for the field, I've got family also that are in the entertainment business that go and tour through the southeastern part of the state, have a lot of fans there that want them to come down and play music and are willing to pay them to do so because they're getting paid well, and they can't do that now. So the ripple effects of these decisions, along with the fact that we've had this ridiculous virus problem, which I dare say is primarily political, despite the fact that the virus does exist and it is a problem. At this point, most of us can agree that the state is being used as a political ploy. But those rippling effects on people just destroy, the entire economy. So those are the heavy things that we've got to face and try to get past. So these are the results of the ripple effect of making those kind of decisions on an entire community, on an entire state that can really, affect everything. Not only is it the actual industry itself, but all of the tied together pieces that support that industry then have effect. Just like we're seeing with this crazy virus situation where all of the businesses that are associated that can't open up and the resultant businesses that are affected by that, take the restaurant industry alone, which we'll come back and talk about more, losing so many restaurants, having them shut down. What about all the suppliers for those restaurants? All of the people that work for those restaurants, all the people that do the other work for those people that work for the restaurants. The infant care or whatever it is. What do you put people in? What do they throw kids in? I don't know. I have kids. Infant care.
Like
Daycare.
Daycare. There's also accountants.
Oh yeah, and accountants and but they can't work. Doctor services, laundry services, all those things that get affected. You guys get to know me a little bit better. My brain sticks like everybody else's. Maybe worse. All right. So anyway, ripple effects across all these industries. But I think in the oil business, particularly simply because it is one of the primary revenue streams for the state of New Mexico and for a large portion of people in the state, that bad decisions on the federal level, bad decisions on the state level, and for good purposes. Hey, doing proper things to help out the world, the earth, to make sure that it stays healthy longer is a good idea. There's nothing wrong with that, but you got to do it wisely and not just willy-nilly. So let me move on with some more things. We have 2 oil refineries in the state of New Mexico that provide all the consumable fuel needs pretty much for the state. One of them is on the Navajo Reservation in the Four Corners. For the Four Corners region, affects those 4 states up there. And the larger one in southeastern New Mexico that supplies southern New Mexico and part of West Texas with its fuel needs, which a lot of people don't realize we actually have refineries in the state. So something to remember. We also have a lot of pipelines, extensive pipelines for both oil and natural gas that pump far more outside of the state than what we use. And so that's just to wrap up that oil section. Real quick, I'm going to talk about the nuclear issues. We don't have any nuclear power plants here. I think I've got a nephew actually works in the nuclear power plant down in Texas, outside of Fort Worth, and he's a very talented engineer, and those systems are so well handled now. I really think that there is a good area to explore for augmenting our energy needs across the nation, and we can do it safely and healthily. It's nothing like it used to be 30, 40 years ago when everybody was protesting and being bothered by it. No nuclear power plants, but we do have the 2nd largest uranium reserve in the nation and 1/3 of the nation's reserves. We don't have any active mines, but they've mined that several decades ago, and now they've stored that. One of the challenges along also with the nuclear thing is we also have an ongoing battle to keep what will likely be the largest nuclear waste holding facility in southeastern New Mexico from being established. That's been a battle going on for a long time. And I have an issue with the storage of those materials, those expended waste nuclear materials down here in our corner of the state. I'm just not sure that you can keep that stuff from leaching into the ground, but I don't know enough about it to have a full answer. It's just my gut instinct. So not dropping facts on that issue, just telling you what I think about it. So, I think we're going to step into the lovely renewable resources category next.
So I think it's very, very important for us to have a renewable energy structure in order to help all of us live through this climate change disaster, because it's super important that we're safe. We have to be safe, so we have to get rid of oil and gas, and we have to go to wind and solar, okay? Very important. And no, I don't think it was wrong for me to spend the discretionary fund for the promotion of New Mexico on food and lovely alcoholic beverages for all of my staff when we never really actually used it for the staff. And so what if I bought $145 a pound Wagyu beef? I mean, come on. It's okay. And yes, I did ask for a jewelry store to open, and no one else was allowed to open, but that's okay. I'm the governor, and I should be allowed to do things that not everyone else can do, because I am, after all, the governor. And so, there. Peasants. As Marie Antoinette said, one of my heroines, let them eat cake. Let them eat Wagyu. Wait, no, that's me. I get to eat Wagyu. They get to eat cake. Or was it biscuits? Maybe it was crackers. Crackers. Yes, crackers. Perfect. Okay, there. Have fun with that. Now they're gonna come after me. How dare you speak of me in such a terrible way? Oh, now I have to change my voice back.
Okay, so let's get on to the energy area of the state. Hope these things are all coming together giving you as brief an overview as possible of some of the key points so that we can get a grasp on it and recognize that while there are two sides of this coin that seem to be clashing with each other, those who think that environmental renewable energy should be the only thing we do and are super upset about any kind of fossil fuel stuff. And then those on the fossil fuel side who say, for the most part, we need to keep using fossil fuels. Maybe we do need to look at renewables, but we need to be very careful about how we look at renewables. I want to try to bridge both of those gaps in the process of delineating these things. So that being said, 9% of New Mexico's electricity is produced by wind turbines. We've got 1,100 electric producing windmills in this state currently, with more planned. There's a big problem in the move to renewable is where the state gets its revenues from. We get 50% of the royalties from the federal government leases in New Mexico. With wind farms and solar, we get no royalties, and they also get huge tax breaks and rebates and grants. I think that's a problem. We likely pay the green energy sector for their product rather than benefit the state. And also the individuals that are involved. There may be royalties getting paid out to people if you use their land to put these wind generators on or solar panels on, but there's not a benefit otherwise. A big question is now in the mix on whether anyone should have such a heavily weighted renewable source after the debacle last week in Texas. Should renewables ever be the complete source of energy? Any one energy source could have issues. So in my opinion, I think renewables are a viable source and that we should do what we can to help the system be sustainable. But I've never thought green energy should be or could be the total source because it is dependent on nature. We are supposed to be working with, not destroying nature, but it shouldn't be destroying us either. So how do we manage to get there? I think that both sides need to take a heavy look at the situation. I think the reality is that there are a lot of problems in the renewable sector in terms of how things are produced, how that they're run, what are the ramifications. We shouldn't be trying to force a system too fast. And I'm going to be getting into that when I talk about the bill here in a moment. But that's my stance on the renewable energy. I'm going to real quickly just say on one other part of renewable energy, geothermal possibilities. There are some really great geothermal possibilities in southwestern and north central New Mexico, but at this time there are no plans to exploit that energy source, which is baffling to me. I think that's a very viable energy source as well and something to be looked into. Let's move on into the Energy Transition Act that was passed back in March of 2019, and it'll hit on a couple of these issues with renewable energy, and then look at the future a little bit, and then get out of here. Okay, so now we're going to hit the big monster to me that is the Energy Transition Act. This was a big thing for our lovely governor that she got passed in March of 2019 session. It's created a daunting problem for the future, is because this administration wants to implement a rapid switch to renewable energy. And you need to read that as wind and solar energy. They're not, like I said, they're not looking at geothermal as any source there, which might need to be looked at. There are no plans to develop those geothermal resources, but definitely a desire to replace oil and gas revenue and shut down the top revenue producer for the state as soon as possible and usher in this behemoth of foolishness, in my opinion. As I said before, royalties don't get paid on wind and solar, as far as I can see, to the state for any reason. There is not, and they also outlay rebates and grants and tax breaks and whatever else that they do in order to get people to build those things. So it costs the state money. The bill will double renewable energy use in the state by 2025. So right now we're at 9%. We're supposed to be up to 20. So I think by then we'll be there. I think that's correct, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure. The requirement to be 50% renewable energy is by 2030. So by in 8 years from now, they want us to be 50% renewable energy across the entire state. 80% by 2040, and by 2045, they want us to be 100% carbon-free electricity generation. We already have a very clean resource that is producing the majority of our electricity needs, running those plants, and that is in natural gas. We have the largest reserves, some of the largest reserves in the nation, as I said earlier, for natural gas. We have it's been proven that natural gas burns very cleanly and is fine for the environment. So, you know, the level of expenditure and the level of push in this direction doesn't make any sense to me. And I think we're fighting nature a little bit more than we ought to in regards to this. Take our time with it. Let's implement it well. Let's make sure that we don't get in a situation like Texas or anyone else may get into. Let's also make sure that there's a problem with the disposal of these things once they're unviable. There's also a problem with having to replace them fairly quickly whenever they build all these systems, and then they have to come in and replace them. Now, I don't know if anybody realizes this, but wind turbines are made out of fiberglass. The panels that are solar panels are made out of materials, all of which burn a massive amount of emissions in the creation, and are also very, very difficult to dispose of. So there's that. Now, talking about the future, thinking about the pros and all this stuff, obviously we have some really good things going for New Mexico in terms of energy right now. We have a lot of bad decisions attempting to be made or being made that will impact us in the future. So in my opinion, the future here is shaky in terms of energy in our economic power in New Mexico, which then really hampers us in many other areas. If you take energy out as an economic strength, then you begin to really mess with other areas of economy. With the current administration, the New Mexico administration and the national administration, the plans to push bad science-driven agendas affect our energy growth, and that strength may really be shaken deeply because of it. As time goes on and we look at other areas, perhaps we can come up with a well-defined course of action. But I feel like our leadership is attempting to push something very fast for reasons other than our energy security and other than a benefit to the citizens. I don't think that it is so easily done. I'm very thankful for all of those with saner heads that fight to keep what we have and to advance good things. It's definitely an aspect that requires a great deal of working together to maintain success in that field, the field of energy. So I think that kind of sums up the whole idea of the future. It's shaky. We don't know. Maybe we have some answers that we just don't know of yet, and we sure can hope and pray for that. But keep an eye on these things. Think about them deeply. Don't just accept what is thrown at you from the main line. I think you'll do yourself some service just to have a good answer for these things. So thanks for being with us. Here's what's coming up for our next episode. We're going to talk about the area that is probably most near and dear to my heart, agriculture. Historically, the anchor for this great state, especially on the ranching side. I think we have something like 26,000 ranches in the state. That's a lot. I'm not sure how they define that though, so I need to do a little more. I'll obviously have some more investigation done for the next episode, but so that's being my background. We'll take a look at how these new attempts at overreach and control will impact us in ag in New Mexico and what we might be able to do about it. There are a number of things internationally, particularly, that are happening as we see big tech make big leaps into farming. Are they making big leaps into, frankly, it looks like they're trying to push us out of agriculture when you have guys like Bill Gates saying that all the first world nations should start eating 100% synthetically raised beef. I just, there's a lot there. That's a story for another day. But we'll see some impact of those kind of things on us here in ag in New Mexico. So we're going to have a chat about that. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in with us. Please make sure you subscribe, like, share, hit that bell, comment, all the other great ways to help on social media, depending on what platform you're using. If, the bell is on YouTube, of course. If you subscribe there, you want to hit that bell to get all the notifications. Facebook, it's a follow and like. Would sure appreciate you doing that. We cannot get the word out without you. This is a useless endeavor for me just to talk into space. I want to help people grapple with things, and maybe we can all together come to understand some stuff and you guys will help me too as you comment. Please do. Please let me know, if you have a disagreement with what I have to say, or if you like what I have to say and you want to add to it. I'd just love to hear from you. If you don't let other people know what we're doing, I only have so many friends, and I'm blessed with a lot of great ones, but you have friends that can then share with their friends and so on. So please drop those things in for us. We are blessed to have, at this point, nearly 350 followers on Facebook. YouTube is still just pretty fresh and just growing, and so we've got a ways to go there. But I'm just stoked that 350 of you would honor me with your being willing to follow my crazy rantings. So see if you can't con some more folks into it too. Please go to as many of the platforms as you can to kind of help us in that way too, because as those things grow, it gives us the ability to impact more people. Mostly your friendship and appreciation for what we are working on here cannot be more appreciated by this little team. We're really thankful that you guys are part of what we're doing. So thanks a bunch. Till next time, we'll see you later. Don't forget to join us at NewMexicoRedShow.com and also on the socials at New Mexico Red. Look us up. And just remember, we're New Mexicans, not New Mexicans.